I'm gonna go ahead and start the recording. So welcome back. Like I said, the next session is called Our Rookie Experience. We're gonna hear from two coaches who were rookie coaches last year. Daphne is the coach of team 18527, and Dagney is the coach of team 18050. They're gonna kind of do a tag team approach and share their experiences as well. Once again, feel free to put in the chat if you have any questions. And go from there. And yeah, so Dagney, Daphne, whoever wants to start first. I think Dagney, you're going to share your slides or your screen, right? Yep, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, I think Dagney's sharing the screen. And so the first slide, though, is mine. So just to give you some background for me, I was encouraged by one of my coworkers at John Deere to start an FLL junior team because, and I coached that for 3 years. I have 2 children who are high needs, special needs. My oldest is on the autism spectrum, and he used Legos as a self-soothing mechanism. And she had my coworker at Deere has had 2 boys who have had full paid scholarships for their college education through FLL and FTC, right? And so she's like, Daph, you can do this. And I'm like, I'm not so sure I can, but she encouraged me to start that. And that was probably 9 years ago now, or no, 8 years ago. And then I was an FLL coach for 6 years, and we went to state twice in Iowa State. So that was exciting. And then for Deere, though, I am not an engineer. I do not have engineering background of any kind. I'm what's called a forecaster. So I do statistics and economics. And so really my kids were on their own with learning all of the skills that they needed. And then what I am really good at, though, is getting kids organized and telling them where they need to be doing, what they need to be doing and which directions to go in and keeping them pulled together. So that was my skill that I brought to the table. I was also good at finding grants and helping them in other ways. So on to Dagney.
Yeah, so I've been involved with FIRST since about 2011. I was on a FIRST LEGO League team for 1 year. And then I did FIRST robotics competition for 4 years in high school. In high school, I also mentored some FLL junior teams and some FLL teams. And then currently I've been mentoring, this will be my 4th year mentoring FRC as well. And then I'm the lead coach for the Ames Middle School FIRST LEGO League Challenge teams, and I've been doing that since 2018. And I applied a lot of my experience coaching LEGO League to coaching FIRST Tech Challenge, especially since a lot of our students on our FIRST Tech Challenge team, Team Photon, were formerly on FIRST LEGO League teams. And so we kind of took a lot of that experience and then applied it to FIRST Tech Challenge. And then we're not really sure where yet, but I'll be doing 2 FLL Explorer teams next year too. Because Team Photon, our students there really wanted to do FLL Explore, and so they wrote a grant, and so I'll be one of the coaches for those 2 teams next year. But I've been volunteering with FLL and FTC as well for a few years. Okay, Daphne, I don't have the speaker notes up, so you'll have to help me out if it's
your slide. That's okay.
But okay, awesome. Yeah. Sounds good. Okay, so like I was saying earlier, if you are a new coach to FTC, but you've been involved in a FIRST program before, you can really use that as a pretty good resource. There are a lot of similarities between the different FIRST programs, especially in terms of like registration, and the core values are across all levels of FIRST, and different things like that, as well as just general like running meetings and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of carryover, I guess, in the FIRST Tech Challenge. Another great resource to take advantage of is like going to, for example, like going to an FTC kickoff, or like just at events, just like finding coaches who have been through the program before and exchange contact information. Daphne mentioned when we were planning for this that she had even like video conference with a few coaches just to kind of like ask them like, well, what was it like? And then just it's like a lot of times I felt like going through this last year, it was like you don't know what you don't know, but just talking with someone else, then you can kind of be like, oh, like Yeah, that seems to be really important. I should probably like look into that a little bit. So that can be pretty helpful. Oh,
Yeah, I'm going to step in here for just 1 second.
yeah.
I agree. If you find one or two of those coaches out there who are willing to just have a phone call with you or email correspondence, when you feel super stupid, because I felt super stupid multiple times, I wasn't sure what I was trying to accomplish. Those people are the ones that would reach out. I could reach out to and just ask questions, and they would make me feel like I was not as far behind as maybe I was. They encouraged me and they gave me a lot of great advice. Sorry.
Another great resource. No, you're good. No, thank you. Another great resource is the game manuals. So game manuals 1 and 2, it's extremely important. Like I can't stress it enough, like how important it is to like read those manuals. And like the coaches should read them, all the students should, like everyone should be reading these manuals, because generally speaking, like if you have a question about something, it's probably in the manual. So like, yes, they do have game rules for the robot game, but they also have like award deadlines and season schedule and just like everything you ever wanted to know. It's probably, a lot of it's probably in the game manuals. One thing that our team did this past season is we chose a couple of the team members spoke up. They're really detail oriented and they wanted to kind of be our game manual experts, quote unquote. Like, of course, everyone read the manual, but they would also be keeping up with all the updates that get sent out and everything like that. And they also really like making Kahoot quiz shows. So we did that at a couple of our team meetings. Is our team members like put together these Kahoots and then we'd play the Kahoots. It takes 5 minutes, but it was a really fun way for them to, yeah, I guess just get to know the game manual in a fun way. Game manual 0, and when you get these in the Google Drive, this is a link, so you can link it to game manual 0. But this is just a resource that is more, it's kind of more, a bit more general. So it'll have like additional things about like software, hardware, different awards. This is not put together by First. It's like some teams came together to put this together. But it's also helpful. And then also depending on which kind of hardware you use for your team. So like Team Photon, we used Rev. So we went to the Rev website and they have a lot of tutorial videos and stuff like that that you can also use as well. YouTube is also a great resource, but yeah.
This one's yours too, Dagney.
Okay, so some good people to know. Becca, who's on this call, is really good to know. And then also Jeff Margaret. Formerly, he was a First senior mentor. He recently changed jobs. I don't know exactly what his role is right now, but he knows a lot of people and is really good at getting you connected, and has a network of contacts like throughout the state.
Dagney, would you mind if I jump in really quick?
Yes,
so
please.
Jeff, as of August 1st, so a few days ago, Jeff was announced or named as the first regional director. So he's kind of in charge of the FRC program. He'll be doing a lot of stuff related. So we are currently and actively looking for a first senior mentor.
Okay, sounds good. So whoever that first senior mentor is, really their job description, or part of it anyway, is to help network. And if you have a question or if you have a need, then and you talk to the first senior mentor, he or she will be able to get you connected with other people who can potentially help you out, especially in your area as well. Speaking of in your area, if you can find like we mentioned before, those FTC coaches who are local to you, that can be really helpful. In addition to getting your teams connected, or like you connected with the other coaches, like the team members can also get connected. So for example, like if there's a local team that has some members really good at programming and programming is a need for your team, one of the great things about First Tech Challenge is we're all trying to help each other become better engineers and innovators. So there's this really great ethos of gracious professionalism and cooperation. So it's really great to be able to get to know those local teams that you can lean on, and then they can lean on you in turn. So that's good. The FTC Discord, this is also another just independently run. This isn't by First, but I joined the Discord early last season, and there's just like thousands of FTC members, alumni, coaches, like on here, and there's different channels for like programming help or hardware help or anything like that. If I have a question and I like spend some time searching online and I can't really find the answer, or I don't even know what to ask, like I've asked questions on this Discord before, and usually I'll get about 8 responses within 5 minutes. So it's pretty nice for quick responses. There's usually at least about a couple hundred people online at any given time. This is also a good resource for your students to get them connected as well. But yeah. And then like you're participating in this this weekend, the FTC Iowa professional development resources are awesome. And then also the coaches coffee and cocktails as well.
So I'm going to intervene right here too. So the Iowa professional development last year, I watched all of the videos. I watched like 40 hours of videos. And there were times that I was listening to those videos thinking, I have no clue what they're talking about, but I'm going to keep watching this video because it's going to become clear at some point. And it all did. And so even if some of it doesn't make sense quite yet as you're getting started, watch the videos, because then when that topic comes up, again, you're going to be able to say, oh, I watched a video on this. I can go back and revisit that, you know? And that was in regards to like the Rev Hub and some things like that. I did not know what a Rev Hub was. I didn't know any of that kind of stuff. So I knew it was something I was going to have to learn, and I watched the video and then I was able to revisit it again.
Cool.
Next slide's mine, Dagney.
All right.
All right, so first steps. There is a checklist for new coaches on the FTC website, and that is a link that you have in your slide there. So when they send this out, you can click on that, but it talks about the registrations, the people to contact, how many people on your team, how many adult mentors or coaches you need, and the background checks, and just all the things that have to happen to create a team, right? Because this first year is overwhelming, but once you've done it once, the next year is going to get easier. But that checklist, I went back to that checklist many, many times. Then the next step is, once you've got your group started, you have to start fundraising. So there's John Deere grants. We presented to our school board and said, if you invest in robotics, it will return to you as a school. And so they gave us a $3,000 gift that helped to purchase our arena and some of our setup. And we didn't think we would get that. We asked for like $400 and they gave us $3,000. And they've also made the robotics position a stipend paid position, paying $1,200 now this year. So we presented to the school board. Dagney's group wrote emails to local companies and stayed in touch with them throughout the year. And then there's what's called a first fundraising toolkit out there, which again has some really great resources that you can go out and look at. The first website has some incredible stuff out there. You just have to take the time to dig into the website to find the information you need. And if you don't know, then you ask somebody else, because they've had the same struggles and they can direct you to the right place to go. All right.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Another quick thing and actually really quick,
Go
I'll
ahead.
add another thing to this slide too. Is that for sure, like getting monetary donations to your team is definitely important. But you can also think about different sort of in-kind donations. So for example, our team wanted to get matching t-shirts. And so we reached out to our local t-shirt company and just told them about our team. And they're like, oh, this is awesome. We'll give you free t-shirts. So like you can also look for in-kind donations as well. So maybe they're not donating money, but they might be donating parts for your team or different things like that, or services. For example, like if you want to do like 3D printing and you can partner with a local company who does 3D printing, there's stuff like that you can do as well.
We're going to hit on that again, Dagney, in the connect
Yep.
slide.
Okay. Sorry.
Next slide's yours.
I just thought of
These
it
are
because I'm
yours.
wearing our free t-shirt and I was like, oh yeah, I'll just say that really quickly. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more to talk about with that you can expand on later. I wanted to put a slide for engineering notebook just on its own because this is extremely important. And I think one of the things that really helped our team be successful this past year was starting this early and then just keeping it consistent throughout the whole process. So we probably started meeting Well, Team Photon, what we did was we started meeting like over the summer and stuff like that. We're getting towards the end of the summer, but it's like fine. Like whenever your team starts meeting, just start this engineering notebook. What we did was we just had a Google slideshow, and then we just kept notes and records of everything we did. So you can include like brainstorming lists, any kind of pictures of your robot or anything you make, or outreach events you do. And we'll talk about outreach later. Just like sketches. If you do sketches on paper, you can take a picture, put it in your notebook, CAD models, different stuff, different things like that. If you ever are making a decision, this is like something that's really important to include in your notebook is decisions and why you made a decision you did. So for example, if you are making your robot and you want this one type of arm on your robot or something like that, as opposed to something else, like explain like, why did you make that decision? And it's going to be really helpful if you can keep this during the season, like while as you're making those things, rather than trying to like right before an event, try to remember back, oh yeah, we thought about this and we did this. Like it's going to be a lot easier if you can just do it in the moment. Another thing with the engineering notebook is to get all the team members involved. So if you just like stress the importance of this, you need an engineering notebook if you want to apply for any of the awards. They all like, this is a requirement for basically every award. And so just getting every team member involved makes it a lot easier rather than if it's just falling on a couple team members' shoulders.
All right, so this is my slide. Goals and success. So this is one thing when Dagney and I were talking this last week and trying to put this together, we both agree it is super important to create a set of goals for your team and then to define what success looks like and then to keep reevaluating that. So for my team at the beginning of the year, we looked at past scores and we decided, gosh, if we could get to 100 points, that would be super successful for us and we would be thrilled. We got to 190 points on our first run. And then we had to redefine what success looked like for us. So, but you want the big goals and you want the small goals for each of the league meets. You can even make goals for the individual meetings and members too, right? And then celebrate success and let the kids decide what the goal is. So at the beginning of the season, I kept talking about engineering notebook and how it's so important. And I talked also about outreach and how that's so important, right? But the kids didn't get it yet. And so they said, forget it. We're not doing outreach. We're not doing connect. We're focusing on a robot. And so that's what they did. They focused on the robot because they could only do so much with so much time, right? And but they made the robot, a working robot, a priority. And with time, they did figure out in the season, outreach is important, engineering notebook is important. And so we had to catch up on some of that. But they have to be the ones who make the decision as to what the goals are. You cannot set those goals for them, even if you think you know better. They have to figure that out for themselves, right? Next slide. So the next slide's mine too. So starting the robot. So we just built, and I think Dagney's team did this too. Every year there's instructions out there for you to build a simple push bot. So you can see on the left, we CAD designed our simple push bot that was from Rev Robotics from the year before, but we were trying to learn CAD at the same time. That was one of our goals. And so we created a simple push bot and then decided that that simple push bot wasn't going to do what we needed it to do. And so by the end of the season, we created the robot on the right and we created it in CAD and we were able to build it within 2 hours after we had all the parts put together, right? So it doesn't sound like it. I mean, there was a time frame and I told Dagney this, there was a time frame in my team where I thought I was going to lose the entire team, right? Because we started with the push bot and we didn't know how to get to where we wanted to yet. So we'll talk about that here in the next slide, I think, or a couple slides, but start simple. and let the kids figure out what they need to do. And they're going to figure this out. Because like I said, I have no engineering experience. I could not help them. And they came up with what was on the right without me doing anything. They had some help from an engineer who knew CAD. But, and that's another thing is starting the robot. I highly encourage trying out CAD. If you don't know it, Onshape has a lot of different tutorials online that would help. And what really helped for us is that we have a parent who's an engineer for a Vermeer company, and he knew CAD quite well. So over the Christmas break on Discord, he sat there and watched them for hours upon hours and said, no, don't do that. No, put that back in. And he taught them CAD virtually during the Christmas break. And that really changed the direction for our team once that happened. All right, the next one is Dagney's slide, outreach.
Okay, so basically, so just to start with, just like what is outreach? Essentially, this is where you can connect, like you can go out in your community and show them like your team and what you're doing and why, or like what, like even like what engineering is, especially to younger kids who maybe have not heard of what engineering is before or anything like this. So you can just kind of like get them excited about it, and hopefully, you know, down the road, then that might be something that they're interested in getting more involved in, and stuff like that. So there's different ways outreach can look. A pretty common way to do it is giving presentations to local groups. So for example, Daphne mentioned that their team presented to the school board. If you're talking about your team and you're presenting to this group, like, I mean, that's an outreach event, right? So you're like explaining about your team, maybe you're explaining about what FIRST is and that kind of stuff. So that is one way of doing it. Another way is demonstration. So I think of this as like events where maybe there's a lot of groups there and you're one of many groups that you have like a booth table set up. Maybe you have like your robot off to the side where maybe it's driving around a little bit, or it could just be stationary, something like this. Right now, I think there's a lot of local farmers markets going on. And so that can be a pretty interesting way to, you can like get out in your community and maybe have a booth at like a farmer's market or something like that. If you're close to Des Moines, I know an event that's coming up that is looking for presenters is the Mini Maker Fair at the Science Center of Iowa. It'll be on Labor Day. And so that's another event where there's like a lot of groups coming with what they've done, and then they can kind of show off to the community. There's also mentoring. So you can either do this with like First Lego League teams or other FTC teams, or even FRC teams, I guess. But basically just like whatever they need help with, kind of like I mentioned before, like if there's a team that really needs help with, for example, like CAD, and your team members, you know some CAD, maybe you could connect with that team and then help teach them a little bit of CAD or something like that. Also, I want to mention that like online is okay. I don't know what next year is going to look like, but if it becomes to a point where your school isn't allowing visitors or isn't allowing travel for school groups or anything like that, or for whatever reason, like you just want to do an online outreach event, like this is fine. Like I was a judge last year for a couple events, and we heard some teams doing like conference calls with teams all across the world, honestly. And that is like totally okay. Like, so just know that that's an option. Also, when you're just starting out, like it's okay to start small. Like I mentioned, like if you just like go to a farmer's market and bring your robot, or maybe you don't even have a robot and you just bring your team members and maybe some pictures about what other teams have done to just kind of like explain like what First Tech Challenge is and what you're excited to do this coming year. It can be like a super small thing. And then also too with outreach, you can think about like encourage your team members to like, what do they enjoy? And maybe you can build an outreach project or event around that. So for example, I mentioned I also mentor this robotics competition team. On Team Neutrino, we have a lot of team members who are really interested in video editing. And so last year, over COVID, they edited a lot of videos, 27 videos that were like 3 minutes long each. And each video had like a STEM activity with materials that kids could do if they find stuff around their house. And then they put those on YouTube. And so that was a form of outreach that really connected with the Team Neutrino members because they really like video editing. So they're like, well, what can we do with video editing that we can like do some outreach with our community? So you can get creative with this and really find things that work for you. The picture that's on the slide is an outreach project that Team Photon did last year. They called it the Robot Design Challenge. And so they emailed a local elementary school, the principal, and then basically they gave them this handout. And then the principal helped them get connected with a specific class. And then basically the challenge was like, design the robot of your dreams and tell us what it does or something. And so then they got all these pictures back. And so that was really fun to read all the responses. And then they also like put together a video about like kind of what Team Photon is, and they shared that with the groups as well. So yeah, you can get really creative with what this looks like for your team.
All right, so this is my slide. So parents, so I love parents. I couldn't have done my team without my parents there because we had a rough year. It was a very successful year, but there were some really rough times during this. And so I organized my parents to always have food. Teenage boys need food. Teenage girls do too, but I had teenage boys and they need food. And so my parents brought in team dinners. They brought in snacks. When I couldn't be there to supervise, they came in and stayed with the kids. There were a couple of nights that went past midnight and I was like, I'm done, I'm out. And there was a dad who's a night owl and he'd say, I'm staying with them. It's okay. And so that's how I got my parents involved. And then carpools to competitions. I even had grandparents coming in and help because they were so excited that their grandkids were involved in something that was different in our community, that the grandparents would come and just watch us practice, which really wasn't all that exciting sometimes, but they always brought food too. And they'd bring cupcakes and tacos. Tacos were a big thing. There was a lot of tacos this last season, but get your parents involved if you can. And even if it's just to be there and cheer on their kids and bring food, that is huge because you need those parents to buy in. I spent as much time with those kids as their parents did this last year. So they need to know that they're in safe hands and that they're being fed and that those kids are happy, right? Next slide is the Connect Award. So we already talked about the Connect Award, but again, this is where you have to recruit help from the community. So I told you, I'm not an engineering guy person, but I found out that one of my kids' dads was an engineer. And so we recruited him to help us with engineering pieces and stuff. He taught him CAD. And then this grandfather came in and he had a person who could laser cut all the metal on our robot there. And so they did that for free because grandpa asked them to. So every custom made piece on our robot was donated. And when Pella Corporation, which we have a parent who works for Pella Corporation, found out that we were having problems with these spokes and they kept breaking, they 3D printed with carbon fiber these spokes that we needed so that they wouldn't break. And then they sent their engineer over just to check on us to make sure it had actually worked and that those spokes were good, right? So you don't ever know where you're going to find these people who are willing to help. But if you don't work with your parents and the schools and everybody else, you're not going to find them. And like the shop teacher, they have a 3D printer there that they don't use at the school. And so we worked with the shop teacher and he came in on Saturdays and printed parts with us and showed us how to use 3D printer based on our CAD designs that we've been working on and stuff. So we made huge amount of connections in our first year, and we are going to use all those people again, right? Because we put them as sponsors and we've kept them informed as to how their in-kind donation really contributed to our success. Like the custom laser cut pieces and parts there, we would have never been able to do that without somebody walking in and saying, yep, send us your CAD designs, we'll have those parts to you in 2 days. All right, next slide. This one's yours.
Okay. So one thing that is really hard is making decisions, especially when different team members think differently, right? Which is a good thing, right? It's good to have a lot of ideas that you can come together and do more together than you can do by yourself. But sometimes it is easy to fall into the trap of thinking it's my idea versus your idea. And so one thing that I just think can be really helpful to, I don't know if you need to talk, like if you want to talk about it with your team or just like when it happens, just maybe address it, but like thinking of things in terms of like idea A versus idea B and trying to separate the person from the idea can be helpful, because at the end of the day, hopefully everyone on your team just wants to have the best robot. And so versus like, oh, I just want to make the robot I want to make, because you're on a team, right? That's part of being on a team. So how can you be objective about making decisions? And so just like having that in mind can be pretty helpful. So maybe some different ways to evaluate, you could maybe build a prototype if you have resources for that, is you could build like a small prototype of each one and test them out, which one works better, and then go with the one that works better. You could also just like list pros and cons of each idea. And this can be a place where coaches can really be helpful in conversations like this to hopefully kind of try to not steer discussion necessarily towards one idea versus another, but mostly just like help the students realize like when they're being objective about things versus being subjective and favoring an idea that they had. Typically everyone just thinks their idea is the best and they just want to do their own idea. But if you can try to help them see that, hey, we're coming together and we're going to have the best idea for our team, like that can be pretty successful.
One thing that Dagney and I talked is that on these teams, we tend to attract some pretty intelligent kids, but just like with engineers at companies and things, we sort of latch on to what we think is the best idea. There's just too many smarts. And so sometimes you have to get them to think about it, as Dagney mentioned, as an idea and not their idea versus someone else's. And that can be really hard to overcome as a team for a little bit until they really work out personalities and different things. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. Yeah. And then also too, another thing I think that can help sort of preempt some of this is team bonding. And so sometimes it's like, oh, team bonding, like, no, but actually it's pretty important. And so basically if you can help your team come together as friends, and then they know that they've got each other's best interests in mind, that can be helpful too. And so like Team Photon this past year, we did a lot of team bonding events where like they would get together on a video call on the weekend and play Among Us and just talk about whatever. And so like stuff like that is also like important for the team, where it's like you're coming together as a team, but maybe it's not centered around FTC. But if you can do things together as a team that are like outside of the robotics part of it, that's also helpful. So like if you can do like game nights or movie nights or just fun stuff together, that can help build some camaraderie also.
Absolutely. I can't agree more on that one.
Another thing that was helpful, another thing that was helpful, I just like looking back on our season. So just to give you a little bit more background about how Team Photon was structured this year, is we had 12 high school students, and then I'm a grad student at Iowa State, and then we had 7 college mentors. And actually the college mentors had some FTC experience in the past, which was really helpful. But one of the things that we had one mentor who was really skilled at just kind of getting a feel for the room. And so when things were getting a little bit heated, and maybe I wasn't really picking up on that, like he was awesome at picking up on that. And so like he would maybe just kind of keep an eye out for when some stuff would start to kind of get like that. And then he would maybe just talk to team members and make sure everything's going okay and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. That was just another thing that was helpful for us.
And this one's yours too, Dagney.
Okay, awesome. So just some main takeaways kind of from things that we've shared. So build your network. So just get to know people, especially for like different coaches that you can lean on for questions and stuff like that. That can be really helpful. Just ask lots of questions. Like, yeah, I think at least for me, like that was definitely just like asking a lot of people a lot of questions, like just helped me learn things that I didn't know I needed to know. So that's really good. Also just keeping in mind like the main goals at all times. So like, at least I in my mind, the main goals are like, we're all here to become better engineers and innovators. And so just keeping that at the center. Also learning. So there's a lot of different times in the season that you're going to be learning things, whether it's things that you expect, or maybe there's things that you learn that you didn't expect that you're going to learn. That's good too. And then also just having fun. It's about the experience, like going through the process. And so that's good too. And then, yeah, also too, we mentioned this before, but letting the kids steer is really important. So this can this can make the difference between whether or not like your students are having fun. Like Daphne mentioned, like her team, they really wanted to build the robot. And so that was how they were going to have fun. On my team, we really liked our team members, they really liked doing outreach projects. And so like planning that robot design challenge, and we had some other things that we did too this year, but that was really fun for them. And so getting to let them kind of steer, and we were going to spend a lot of time on outreach and maybe less time on the robot. But that was going to be how they were going to find success. Yep.
And I have just a couple more comments here too as we tie this up. But so for my team, we had no experience with FTC, and 2020 was our first year, or this last year, 2021, whatever it was. This was our first year. So we have a lot to learn yet. Like, we've never been on a play field with 3 other robots. We don't know anything about a actual competition. Everything we did this last year was remote. So I think we have learned that this is all about learning, and there's still so much to learn ahead of us, and we're still scared about what's ahead of us, and yet we know that we'll figure it out together as a team. And then the other thing that I thought of, and we should put this in the slide deck somewhere, I'm sorry, Dagney, I didn't think about it till today, is that failures are never failures. Like, we smoked a motor and I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? How did we do this? But every failure, we learned something, and we didn't smoke a motor after that, right? So every time we'd make a mistake and we would laugh about it later, there was a lot of not very happy people when we made the mistakes initially, but we'd laugh about it later. And we wrote about those things in our engineering documentation, that our failures really taught us so much about what not to do. Right. And so we tried to change the mindset that when we did fail on something, what do we learn from that one? And that is a big thing too. Try and make the things that seem like a negative into a positive here, because every day we met, there was something new that we all learned together. Okay, I'm done talking. I think that's the end of our slide deck now.
All right,
Yes.
awesome. We do have a few questions. So do either of you, or did either of your teams use Onshape or Fusion 360? And why did you select the CAD program that you used?
So we used Onshape, and the engineer father that I told you about, he told us to use Onshape. So Fusion, I think we would have had to have gotten a grant, and it would have cost some money, whereas the online Onshape is free, right? And you can use it online. They store your designs online, and it has version control on it. So we just did the simple Onshape. Now there's a lot of different CAD programs out there, but when it came down to it, Onshape did enough for us to keep us moving in the right direction. Now, will we try something different in the future? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know that one, but Onshape is what we used this first year.
Was there a fee for your team to use Onshape?
No, it's free online.
Awesome.
You have to have like, they have to log in with their school email address.
Okay.
But it's free to kids who are in school. And then if your coach has like I was able to log in through one of my kids' logins, but if your coach has a school district email, you could log in also.
You guys mentioned the engineering notebook, and that was a great portion. Would you mind touching base on the engineering portfolio? I think there might be a little bit of a confusion. Yeah, right there. Yeah.
Yeah, I can take this one.
Okay.
So the engineering notebook is going to be your working document throughout the whole season that you're using to really document your whole story. At an in-person event, what this usually looks like is like a thick binder full of like all your lists, all your sketches, like everything you've done for the whole season. Now, from a judging perspective, we only really get maybe like 5 minutes to look through this whole big binder. So the engineering portfolio is like the cliff notes of your notebook. So it's only 15 pages. And so it's kind of like your team's resume of these are the highlights that we really want to make sure that the judges know about our team. Those engineering portfolios usually look a lot more polished. It's kind of just like you still are showing your whole story of your team throughout the season, but it's a lot more like polished and everything. Your engineering notebook might have like, you know, they always say like, oh, it's like you got your pizza stains on it or your whatever. So that's like going to be your actual working document. And then the portfolio is really polished, short version.
Awesome. Very cool. When you guys were talking about outreach, there was a question that came up. Would mentoring and FLL Explore and Challenge teams count as outreach?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. And secret little hint to how to ace a judge's interviews and what the judges are looking for is to go online, and when the judge volunteer manual is released, take a look at that because it will highlight what judges are kind of looking for. So yeah, and it's open to the public. Everybody can see it. Okay, a very difficult question. When do coaches sleep?
We don't. We don't. I think
Yeah.
there were weeks that so we started in September, not knowing anything, right? And we met every day after school for 2 hours a day. So that was 10 hours a week for quite a while. After Christmas break, we were meeting 40 hours a week because we would work every night after school. And then we came in on Saturdays, sometimes for 12-hour days. So this next year, it's not going to be like that, right? We had a huge uphill climb just to learn what we needed to learn the first year, but we've all agreed that that was too much. We love each other, but it was too much, right? And we've all agreed to back off from that and try and keep it to 10 hours a week or less. And what I would say is that's where your parents can come in. I was not able to stay there all the time, right? And I was tired. And there were other things I needed to do, like laundry, so my kids had underwear. And so I would have other parents come in and just say, you're going to stay. They want to stay later. And I got to get home and take care of some things. So you're going to have to just sit with them, right? They just need a parent to make sure that they don't run into any major catastrophe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just a little bit different story from Team Photon. We only met probably about 4 to 6 hours a week as a team. And so that was just what we had. And then this goes back to like defining what are your goals for your team and what does success mean for you. So at the very beginning of our season, we talked as a team about like, okay, what do we want to focus on and that kind of thing. And so our top 2 goals for our team were like the Connect Award and the Motivate Award. And so we talked about, okay, if that's a priority, like, let's make sure that everything we're doing is kind of like directed towards that. Yes, we're going to also have a robot, and that's something we're going to get to experience this year as well. But so you just like the time that you have to meet as your team is just one of your constraints. And so then you can work within that to work towards your goals. But yep.
And speaking of goals, so two of our big goals was the robot itself, right? Mm-hmm. And then that sort of led into CAD. And so we didn't need to spend 40 hours a week, but that's how long the boys wanted to spend. They really wanted to spend that time because they enjoyed what they were doing. And so that's where I had to get other parents to sit in for me because I couldn't be there the whole time that they wanted to work.
And one other quick asterisk to that comment, Daphne, too, is keep in mind last season was longer than what a traditional season is, right? So it might be, you might end up spending, let's say 40 hours a week on the week prior to a competition, but competitions will hopefully be significantly earlier this year. But yeah, so hopefully you won't be 40 hours a week for like 3 months.
Yeah, no,
it might just be for a week. Yeah.
Don't do that. Get parents to cover
Yeah.
for you.
Exactly. So, Daphne, can you tell us a little bit about FTC scholarships and finding grants, please? And this stuff is on the first website, but if you have any tips or tricks,
So,
Daphne.
okay, I have not applied for any yet, right? But I do have, my coworker has two friends who have had full paid scholarships, both in engineering programs. One is now a PhD at Texas doing something big, and the other one's got his master's from Iowa State and is working for Amazon. So they had full paid scholarships, and Becca's absolutely right. There is a list of scholarships for robotics out on the first website, and some of them are state specific, some of them are overall, some of them are school specific, right? So there's lots of different opportunities out there. And then there's the dean list, which I have not, again, last year was my first year and I'm really new at this, but the dean's list is a big opportunity for kids too. And I do have two kids that either this next year or the following year, I think I will probably fill out the applications for them. But it's all online. That website has just about everything you need.
And I do like on this slide that we're seeing right now, the goals and successes. The third bullet down, do celebrate your successes, right? I mean, hey, I remember actually, if you don't mind, Daphne, if I can embarrass you a little bit, because
Sure.
I remember when your team was very new, and I think it was November or December, you called me up and you were so excited because your team got the robot to move. And
Yes,
that was awesome. That was great. And that's, you guys needed to share it. And
we got something to move. And then,
yeah.
Honestly, we didn't get a robot to move anything until November. And remember, I started September 1st with my team, right? And then the shooting mechanism was next. And so once we got a shooting mechanism, I mean, you could have heard screams throughout the whole school if there had been anybody else there at midnight on a Saturday night, but there wasn't. So, I mean, we did try to celebrate everything we did because everything came as a struggle for us since we honestly had never seen an FTC tournament. We'd never done any of it. So we had to celebrate because otherwise we would have fallen apart. There was a few times I was worried my team would fall apart, but they really came through in the end.
Yeah, and another reason we kind of put this on here too is because I think it's really easy to sort of have a goal in mind, and then you, throughout the process, you met the goal, but you subconsciously raised the bar for yourself. Mm-hmm. And so, like, for example, that happened, I think, at a few of our like league meets where we were like, okay, coming in, like our first league meets goal was like, we want to get those 5-point autonomous for driving forward. And we did that. And then at the end, they were like, oh, then we were, how'd it go? And everything. And they're like, oh, like, not as well as we wanted. It's like, wait, but what was your goal? Oh, we wanted the Auton points. Well, did you get that? Well, yeah. It's like, okay, like, great job. So, so like, yeah. I think just reminding them back to like, well, what was your goal? And like, yeah, anyway.
And another little asterisk to that too. Your robot is never going to be ready. When you get to whether it be a virtual event or an in-person event, your robot is never going to be done. It's never going to be ready. Several years ago, and this has probably been a decade already, I had a coach call me up the morning of an event and he said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to withdraw the event today. I said, what's the matter, Ed? And he said, we don't have wheels on a robot. We just have, gear train, and that's it. I said, bring your kit, bring a computer, bring students. Get your tail over here and we will help you out. And we kind of went back and forth, right? But I encouraged. And he brought one kid, he brought his kit, he brought a computer. By the end of the day, they had a working robot. It wasn't perfect because no robot is perfect. But ever since then, this team has excelled at building a robot. They do a lot. He pushes his students now because he knows that he's comfortable doing that, and that failure is okay. And that's how kids learn, right? Is by trial and error and failing. So just please remember, your robot is never going to be ready.
It became an ongoing joke in our team
Mhm.
as to one kid would tear it apart the night before we needed to run every single time because he was trying to tighten something or he was trying to do something. And we finally had to say, you've got to stop this. Stop tearing it apart.
Absolutely. Well, any last or final questions or comments for Dagney or Daphne before we take a 10-minute bio break? Thank you, ladies. Fantastic. Their slide deck will be shared using a Google Drive folder, as well as a copy of this recording will be posted on YouTube. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.